On today's show, a little Locked On Clippers mailbag talking about the future of this team and how we can get Jordan Miller and the youth more minutes. How can we do that? We're going to be talking about it all on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You were locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in LA. Just finished my 20th season as a Clipper fan. Been covering the Clippers for 5 years on my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, and 3 years right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, hit the notification bell, and of course, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. This episode, we're going to be talking about the mailbag. Got some questions from the listeners, including some plans for next season, the next 5 years, the near future of this team. Got some questions about Jordan Miller, how he could fit into the rotation, and of course, the youth of this team or how we can get this team younger. So let's begin with the first question coming from my good friend Bibbs, former Mavs fan. I don't know if after the Luka trade he feels betrayed or not. My man at Bibbs Corner on X or on Twitter, he says or asks, what peak do you think is fair to expect from the Clippers in the next 5 years, and how do you expect to get there? So this was an interesting question, right? Because for me, I've been pretty adamant that I don't think we're a championship team with Kawhi and James Harden at the helm anymore. I think we're just a little old, and those two together at this age, even with a slightly better supporting cast, I don't think that's championship bound. So if we're somehow able to pivot into another era in the next, remember, it says the next 5 years, not the next 2 years. So in the next 5 years, if we're somehow able to pivot into another era where we have a number one option, like a real number one option like Kawhi, but that just probably stays healthier would be the difference, then we might peak higher then, but that's too much unknown. Too much unknown going on over there with the next 5 years or whatever the next era of Clipper basketball could be. So I would say that the most obvious, or not obvious, but the most logical way that the Clippers could peak or when they would in the next 5 years would be next year. If they can go out and just add a power forward and then a backup center, bring a lot of the same guys back, maybe get a backup point guard to go alongside Bogey. But you have Chris Dunn. I mean, if you start Chris Dunn next year and you get a backup point guard to be alongside Bogey in the backcourt, but the number one and two things we have to go out and get, a power forward and a backup center. We get those two, then I think that the highest peak of this Clipper team in the next 5 years, the most logical way to guarantee it is to just make improvements to this current roster that finished 50 wins with Kawhi Leonard only playing 37 games and have some, new reinforcements and then come back next season with a really strong roster. I think that is the most logical answer to where can the Clippers peak, or what do you think it's fair to expect from the Clippers in the next 5 years, and how do you expect to get there? And in terms of what peak, I mean, I think we can get past a round, making it past 2 rounds. A lot of that's dependent on Kawhi Leonard's health and James Harden. Does he run out of gas? How's he played during the regular season? Has he had to carry a load again, so he's going to burn out in the playoffs? That stuff all matters, but I think right now what I'd say is we could win a round next year with some improvements. We were 1 game away from winning one this year against the team that was 1 game away from beating the team that's likely going to win the championship. So that's my thing. I think we can make it past the first round. Anything past then, I am not sure. But making it to the second round is not easy. We haven't made it since 2021. I think that is easier to guarantee success, or I can be more confident saying we can get past the first round next year than I think we can get past it in 3 to 4 years. And kind of on a piggybacking off that question, we have a question from Rostradamus on Twitter. He asks, with the league headed towards the direction it is, do you think Balmer waits until it's too late or gets ahead of it? Now, that question wasn't that specific. So when it says with the league headed towards the direction it is, does that mean the new CBA causing for a new team to be in the finals every year? Does that mean look at the teams that are in the finals, they're getting younger? I'm not sure, but if it is about the team getting younger and about moving on to the next era, I truly don't know, because the thing is, people always say you don't want to blow it up too late. But what we do know about Steve Ballmer is that he doesn't want to blow it up. He doesn't want to he doesn't want to accept being bad in order to be great in future years. That is not something that he's interested in. He always wants to stay competitive, kind of like that 2018-19 team where we were supposed to be retooling, but we were still competitive. So if that's his idea, I don't know, because we don't have the draft capital for a little bit. And without draft capital, it's hard to rebuild or retool or whatnot. So I think the Clippers are still looking for ways to get into that next era smoothly. But without the picks, it's kind of hard, and we don't know what's being offered for, say, the players that are on the team now. So, to be honest, I am scared that Balmer waits too long and doesn't try to go a different direction. I am. If that's what the question is asking about, the league is getting younger and we want to pivot from an older team because, as I said, we literally led the league in older players getting significant minutes. On that chart, I kind of shared the data from in the last episode. So that's the thing there. My overall takeaway is, if we're asking about the peak of this team or what it could be in the next 5 years, the best version probably would be this upcoming year. If we can just improve certain aspects of the roster, we already have a very solid team. We already have a very solid team. You plug in some players that fill some holes, and then boom, we're competing yet again. So that's my thought, is the best version of this team. If you want to ask me, man, when will the Clippers peak in the next 5 years? I think the best version of them should come next year, because you just don't know what's going to happen. When James Harden's 38 or in 2 years of Kawhi Leonard, we don't know who we could go out and get. But coming up, going to be answering a question about Jordan Miller. Can he break into our rotation next season? Going to be answering that coming up. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's talk about something that doesn't get talked about enough: men's mental health. There's this pressure to always keep it together, to perform, provide, and never show weakness. But the truth is, real strength comes from opening up and taking care of your mental well-being. You can say that again. Every year, 6 million men in the U.S. experience depression, and many go undiagnosed. But talking to someone, a friend, a loved one, or a therapist can make a huge difference. Therapy isn't just for crisis moments. It's great for learning how to set boundaries, build healthy coping tools, and be the best version of yourself. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, so back here with the Locked On Clippers mailbag, and we got a question from my boy Jonathan Ang. Jonathan asks, how do you think Jordan Miller gets rotation minutes this year? Now, that's a good question, because We saw some flashes from Jordan Miller at times this season. I even was like, damn, this guy's good. He's got great touch around the basket, a really good floater, finds a way to get in the paint. This season, he averaged 4 points a game, only played 37 games. He shot 43% from the field, but just 21% from three. So I think your answer is right there. He's got to shoot the three ball better. I mean, with our struggles, especially from our role players in the playoffs, we need guys that are going to knock down open threes. And Jordan Miller has some pretty good size. He's 6'5", he has long arms, and he gets in the paint pretty well. Now, self-creation wise, I'm not too sold on that at the NBA level, but attacking closeouts, deceleration, those long 1-2 steps around the basket, Jordan Miller is really, really good. He's also good at finishing through contact, as we saw in the Summer League last year. However, teams aren't going to close out hard and honor his jump shot until he starts making threes at a higher clip. So for me, the things with Jordan Miller that he needs to improve on are very simple. 3 and D. Can he stay out there defensively and hold his own? That's something I think he can do, but we need a little bit more of a larger sample size. And then knocking down the three ball. It's really that simple. Because it doesn't sound like Amir Coffey is going to be back with this team next year. So if we bring in a backup big, let's say we got off the bench, assuming we start Derrick Jones Jr. and got a new power forward, and traded Norman Powell. Let's just use that as an example. We'd have Bogey, Chris Dunn, Nico Batum, a new backup center, and then we could have room there for a Jordan Miller. We could. That's where Jordan Miller, and I really hope we do. That's where Jordan Miller needs to knock down the three ball at a better clip than 21%. Now, this is him going into his third year, and he's going to be turning 26 this upcoming season in January. So he's not a young rookie per se. This is going to be his third year, but he's going to be already 26 years old. So we got to start seeing something from Jordan Miller very soon, or else it's going to be another situation where the Clippers don't really play a young player much because he's not good enough to get into a win-now team, and then we don't even know if he's going to stay in the league. And that's the main thing to remember here. I got another question about something like that, where someone asked, well, are there any Spectres 2 on Twitter? Spectres R2 said, are there any young players that can come in and help this team? I just feel like we're too old. We need to get younger to contend. The league is getting younger and we have older stars. Totally valid. But here's the thing. We have the 30th pick in this year's draft. I got asked some questions about that as well. Like, who should we pick? Honestly, I can't tell you because I'm not super, knowledgeable on this upcoming draft class. But Zach Clips, at Zach Clips on X, asked, how available do you think our first-round pick is in trade talks? Would you be okay with trading this year's first? Absolutely not. I think we need to take this opportunity to take a young player. I know we haven't been good at drafting recently, and that's what makes things sus as well in terms of a potential rebuild. Would we even draft well? Besides SGA, we haven't made a good pick since Blake Griffin, seemingly. Terrence Mann, of course. And Amir Coffey hasn't been bad either. But I would not trade the pick. We don't have first rounders in the next coming years like that. So we should keep the pick and see if it can be someone, whether they can help us this year or next year, get somebody young. The thing that is always the dilemma, as I just mentioned, is having young players on win-now teams. How many young players are good enough to get into a rotation of a win-now team like a Christian Brown, like certain guys have done for their teams in history? It's not very frequent. Usually they have a couple years under their belt. So that's the thing. And those might be wondering, how can those players prove themselves with such limited burn? That's a real thing. Because guys like Jordan Miller, guys like Kobe Brown, who maybe should get an opportunity to be a backup 4 next year. And then maybe we start Nico. I don't know. If we don't find an answer, we start Nico and then Kobe Brown off the bench. But I don't know if that's the answer that we need. We might need somebody a little bit more established in that starting lineup, and Nico's older. But what makes it hard is you need to be a guy that probably can knock down threes, play defense, and have the IQ, the basketball IQ to be out there in crunch time of big games, and you're ready to go even with minimal experience. That is tough to find because high-level playoff basketball ain't easy. And a lot of times young players are not ready for that. Now, when it comes to the development of young players, sometimes you need them to be on a team that's not very good so they can try things out and build confidence against other NBA players. That is where the Clippers have never been put in a position to be in because they're always trying to contend. So you're not going to get young players making mistakes and going through their trials and tribulations when you're invested in the Kawhi Leonard era. So when it comes to making mistakes and all that, the Clippers in a win now situation, they don't have patience for that. We don't have time to have Kobe Brown and Jordan Miller screw up and go through their own personal journey when you have Kawhi Leonard that you're invested $50 million per year into. That's just the unfortunate reality for those that want to play younger guys and this and that. We need to have young guys that are ready to play, or else they're not going to, because we are still invested in the Kawhi Leonard era. Now, speaking of the stuff about the Kawhi Leonard era, someone asked, it was at Clipped by Harden, what star do you think the Clippers should pursue when the Kawhi era eventually comes to an end? Honestly, no idea. I hate to be someone without an answer there, but are we looking at free agency of 2026 or 2027? Are we looking at trades? What's even a realistic trade? But let's just use the free agency class of 2026 for now. Now, honestly, I'm going to go with 2027 because 2027 is when Kawhi is a free agent. So let's think about it, right? They're ranked in terms of how much they're making. So Giannis's contract, it seems like he's got a player option in 2027. Let's take a look. Yeah, he's got a player option in 2027. I mean, I hope he's still a buck at that point. But if we could get Giannis, I mean, obviously that would be like the pipe dream. Giannis at age 30. I'll take Giannis at age 32. I don't care. 32-year-old Giannis, you may get 1 or 2 more prime years out of him. But this, depending on, considering how long these primes are these days and how much longer guys are able to play at an all-star level due to modern surgeries, load management, and just in terms of the culture around player protection and protecting the player. I think Giannis would be obviously the number one choice. You also have, Steph, Anthony Davis, and Damian Lillard and Jimmy Butler in that discussion, but they're all going to be older. I would not, go for them. Jokic, I don't think he's leaving Denver, but by all means, you should definitely try to go for him. That would be him going. He would be 31 years old. So absolutely would still be a great time to go for Jokic. I don't see any possibility where Jokic is a Clipper. And then Paul George's contract is expiring. We could get him back. Psych. Karl Anthony Towns, Bradley Beal, those guys, I don't know about that. And then you've got Donovan Mitchell, who that could be very enticing. If he hasn't won with Cleveland yet at that point, wants a change of scenery, definitely. There's a lot of good unrestricted free agents that year. SGA, Trae Young. So there's some options there. Tyler Hero. But it's a long ways away. So that's something that we should think about later down the line. I don't think the Clippers are going to make any moves, to pivot away from the Kawhi era anytime soon. But coming up, going to be talking about our sixth man situation for next year. Are we going to have both Norman Powell and Bogdan Bogdanović on the roster? Going to be talking about that coming up. I got to tell you a little something about open phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the number one business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. Open Phone lets me manage business calls and texts from a single app. The shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat. OpenPhone is offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's openphone.com/lockedonnba. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, so the Locked On Clippers mailbag. Been asked questions about next year, when you think in the next 5 years we're going to get the best version of the Clippers. I think next year is the best opportunity. Of course, next year we're going to be hosting All-Star Weekend at Intuit Dome, so it will be a fairly hectic season. And of course, getting ready for a World Cup in the States and in LA in 2026. Of course, it doesn't have much to do with the Clippers, but it does have something to do with Inglewood. Because, oof, that's going to be crazy. SoFi, World Cup, All-Star, Olympics the next 3 years. Jesus. So let us talk about another question that was asked. And it's the same guy, my boy Zach Clips. He asked, who do you think is more likely to be traded, Bogey or Norm? Well, I think, honestly, Norman Powell. And I'm saying that because we just got Bogey. And I also think Norm being $4 million more, I think that contract isn't as appealing to the Clippers, and it's an expiring contract, whereas Bogey has a team option the following year. So I think it'll be easier to trade. They're both the same age. And I said in the last pod, or the second to last pod, I feel they both are sixth man kind of players. I don't feel as though that having both of them on the same team is productive, or I feel like it's kind of redundant when you already have James Harden, who is super heavy on one end of the floor. You probably want someone that's a little bit more defensive around Harden. So Bogey coming off the bench is what I want next year. I love Norman Powell. I think he adds an element of off-ball movement to our starting lineup that's very desperately needed. But I think in order to get the best version of Norm, he needs 10-plus shots a game. And I like the six-man nature of a Bogdan Bogdanović who can come in and not just shoot open shots and make open shots, but also play make a little bit and pick and roll. So, he wasn't great in the playoffs, Bogey. But now there was Norm. They both let me down. They both let us down to a large degree. I think Norman Powell was the most disappointing player of the playoffs because there were a lot of games where he got just clean open looks and couldn't hit them. And if he's not doing that, he's not giving you too much on other ends of the floor. Of course, in game 4, he didn't rotate in front of Aaron Gordon when we double teamed Jokic, and it ended up costing us the game. So I love Norman Powell, but I think it's more likely to see him go and keep Bogdan Bogdanović and hopefully replace Norm with a power forward or a real backup center, although trading Norm for a backup center seems like it's a little bit of a loss for us. I think the power forward arc or the power forward option is the one that we would need prefer for Norman Powell. Someone else asked, this was at Wisest Strix on X, asked, what do you think will happen this season after next season? I have no idea. That all depends on how next season goes. If you had told me that this past season was going to go terrible, I'd say we're going to pivot and stuff. We're going to go away from this era. But we didn't. We had a good season, especially in the eyes of Balmer and the organization. So we're going to run it back. Now the question is, if we're playing decent basketball but clearly not championship basketball in the middle of the season, and Kawhi and them are healthy, are we going to try to trade them? Are we going to try to pivot in the middle of the season? I don't see that happening. It all depends on if they get an offer good enough for their stars. Now, my boy Phoenix7865 asks, in the event that they try to trade Kawhi Leonard, what sort of package would you be content with? Well, either we're not going to get a star that's equivalent to Kawhi Leonard. So I would be down if we got another star to kind of replace him so we're not completely like ass in the beginning of the post-Kawhi era. But if we can get some picks back, first round picks, of course, that would be ideal. Now, how many would Kawhi net us? Probably not many, but I would love to get some first round picks back. That would be more than anything what I want to see. My boy Edward at ClipperFan411 asks, if you had to fire or trade one person, who's first to go? I'd say Norman Powell. Personally, I'd say Norman Powell. And I already answered why. And then I got a lot of Ty Lue stuff. I mean, I'm not going to really get into the weeds with that because I have a different episode planned for the Ty Lue stuff. So you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Dime Dropper Pod. Subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper and LA sports content. And Locked On Clippers is free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Let's get up to 8,000 subscribers. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, the age-old proverb continues. Go Clippers.